Hello, everyone. Welcome to the SIG Instrumentation call. Today is September 5th, and we have a couple of agenda items today. First of which is a status update of Kubernetes 1.16 SIG Instrumentation feature implementation. And we have Han. Han, take it away.
The stability framework stuff has been has made it to 1.16. We have migrated the various binaries to use the stability framework, so we're in alpha, I guess.
But we did not get in the flags for enabling hidden and deprecated metrics and stuff like that.
That is true, but since we didn't actually deprecate any of the metrics, it ended up not being necessary. So we can do the flag to enable hidden metrics is only useful if there's something that you can enable, which there wasn't any of, so we deferred it.
Yep, sounds good.
Which I guess, sorry, Elena, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, on my side, I finished removing the deprecated labels from cAdvisor metrics, so there's no more pod name and container name stuff in 1.16. It's gone now.
Yeah, great. That's been a long time coming. I think we pretty much a year ago started discussing this.
Yep.
And it's finally happening. That's very cool. Thank you for all your work. I guess that's kind of a segue to roadmap for Kubernetes 1.17. We don't have an owner for this item on the agenda, but I guess kind of what Han was just saying is our major contributions that we want to get in, which is all the things that gets us to a beta stage of metric stability / Kubernetes metrics overhaul. So that's primarily getting all these flags into the various binaries so that we can hide these metrics by default and ultimately move forward with the Kubernetes metrics overhaul. Is there anything else that people already know that we would want to do for the 1.17 release cycle?
Yeah. We basically want to remove all direct Prometheus references from the Kubernetes codebase. So right now we have wrappers around all the Prometheus constructors, metrics constructors, which are not the custom collectors. So that means that for most metrics instantiations, we're going through the stability framework, so we can guarantee whether or not that metric conforms to whatever we're saying, like the stability level or whatever. We go through the boot sequence and we verify that the metadata corresponds to what we had before. The problem is, right now it is possible for someone to mistakenly initialize a metric using the old Prometheus constructor. That means this metric will, if they use the old, the native Prometheus constructor and register it to the native global Prometheus registry, it actually just won't show up. And so this is a coding error, but it is an understandable, avoidable coding error. And one way to safeguard this is to make Prometheus imports impossible from the Kubernetes binaries. And in order to do that, we would need to wrap all of the other Prometheus references and throw them into our metrics framework. It shouldn't be that hard. It's just a little bit of plumbing.
In the meantime, can we make sure that I just don't remember exactly if we've done this, but can we make sure that our documentation about metric stability clearly says that if metrics are not annotated, they're by default alpha?
It does say that.
It does say that. Okay.
But actually for beta, what I was thinking is we control the ingestion thing. Once we have the Prometheus collector stuff wrapped, we can basically just bar if someone does not explicitly state a level.
Right, that would be part of the linting process. That's what I was thinking as well.
Yeah, I mean, right now we are okay with not having a stability level, but I'm not actually not sure if that's desirable. Maybe just actually requesting a stability level at metric instantiation is probably just better.
I feel like it's unnecessary hurdle to think about when doing initial instrumentation. I feel like the stability level really only becomes important when you really want to create a stable metric. So I think having a default to alpha is a fine thing to do, but the defaulting needs to happen.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I also wonder if the docs or the CAP, or I'm pretty sure the CAP says this. Han and I were working on a blog post for the Kubernetes blog to talk about the metrics overhaul. I should double check that to make sure that it also says that, because I think that'll be some of
I'm pretty sure, no, it defaults to alpha.
Yeah.
That's explicit.
I don't know how obviously we call that out.
The thing I'm suggesting is not in the CAP, which is the thing I am suggesting is that we should make the stability level an explicit requirement of instantiation, because when people who are not familiar with the code are looking at this thing, it is just more obvious rather than this stability property being inferred at runtime.
I understand what you're saying, but I feel like I want to keep the bar of introducing a metric as low as it is today. And
it's not that bad. It's like, if you look at all of the metrics and they all have this stability level, then basically it's not going to be a bar. That's not going to be a bar. I mean, people are looking at other metrics and copying them. That's how they're writing metrics in the first place.
Looking over this blog post, I don't think that we call out explicitly that if you don't specify a stability level, it's considered alpha. So I'm going to maybe add that.
Okay.
Okay. I think the requiring to specify one, I think we can think about that more in the 1.17 timeframe. I definitely think it needs more thought. Also, I feel like in what everyone said, we don't seem to have full consensus.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I have mixed feelings about it. I mean, yes, there's a little bit more song and dance, but at the same time, there's already a little song and dance. So I'm not sure if the additional song and dance is going to make things significant.
What are you referring to?
I mean, the metrics instantiation phase is slightly different now because the counter ops has to be a pointer to a counter ops, as opposed to the struct. It's because we're modifying the thing. But
yeah, I think that's small enough that it's okay. I think it's just I think the pointer is a thing. I totally agree. People will just copy, and that's fine. But I think the stability level, unless people actually want to make it a stable metric, people shouldn't need to think about it. And even if it's there, people will think about it. And I feel like that's not a burden that I want to put on people necessarily.
Yeah, I think it's fair to basically say, unless you want to own and maintain and ferry a metric through the whole life cycle of being a stable metric, you don't actually have to think about metric stability.
Yeah, that's how I see it as well. Like, there should be the hurdle to introduce a metric should still be extremely low. Like, most metrics have relatively low time span, or like lifetime, and they're like super bound to the surrounding code. And I don't want
to. I mean, like, I've heard people say this. I don't know how true that is, actually, in practice.
I think it's very true. I've removed metrics numerous times because of the surrounding code. I think.
Yeah, I mean, we have definitely removed metrics, but the frequency at which it has been happening has not been increasing. Like in 1.16, I don't think there was any that we removed.
I'm more talking about instrumentation philosophy almost than concrete Kubernetes examples. Like in code bases that other code bases that we maintain, this happens a lot, I would say.
One of the things that I'm sort of excited about as far as some of this metrics stability stuff goes is even though like say we don't really change the contributing experience to adding a metric, right? So like with defaults to alpha, people aren't really thinking about that. One of the benefits that we still get is because they're using our wrapped metrics, those new metric additions get called out to SIG instrumentation as part of the review process. And so we're getting much better visibility in terms of what metrics people are contributing now. Adding and at that point we can maybe like at that review time say, oh, like maybe you want to indicate that this is an alpha metric explicitly because this is like users might like think that this is something that they can rely on and they shouldn't be doing that. But I mean, it defaults to alpha. So
I mean, we won't get pinged for alpha ones though.
Oh, okay. Do we want to? Because that maybe is something that would be.
That's what I was about to bring up as well.
It's a little bit harder. The reason why we did not opt to include all of these things in alpha is one, we're gating. So the review process is like, we determine all of the metadata for stable metrics and we put them in a SIG instrumentation folder, right? So we know when stable metrics have changed. And SIG instrumentation must review stable metrics because these are now going to be like forever, or at least you have to go through the formal deprecation process. Alpha metrics, however, don't have those guarantees. And so you can do whatever you want with alpha metrics. So they can be unconformant, it's fine, because they are alpha metrics. Like you are experimenting with this thing, whatever. Also, the static analysis piece is a little bit more difficult because we rely off of a certain implicit structure for us to be able to parse the fields from the metrics to annotate all the metadata. And like, if you're creating a metric dynamically, then we might not have the information, or we might not be able to derive the information at static analysis time in order to generate this file. So that's why alpha was left out.
Yeah, I understand the technicalities around this, but I think Elena has a point. Like, it would be great, even if we're not making it a required review. It would be nice if we could, like, it could be a totally different mechanism how we do this. But for example, like we now have the metrics stability framework and people must use that to instantiate it. Maybe we literally just get pinged on chain like diffs that involve our metrics instantiation or something like that. I'm not, there's more technical details that we would need to think about in that case. I'm just saying, I'm more thinking about the use case that Elena said. How we would accomplish it is a different question.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of ways, right? There's one, you could do a proud task, and then you could just, scrape the diff and do whatever. Another way is, basically similar to the way that we do the stable metrics, we can have another folder with all of the alpha metrics. So this would be an argument for not forcing metrics to have an alpha thing. So if you were to annotate the thing with alpha, then basically you would have to be as parsable as a stable metric.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can have some folder which literally the entire where the owners of this folder are all the members of Kubernetes. So that basically people don't actually have to get approvals for this extra file. And so it will, during your build, you'll just generate a new version of this file, but a change to that file will auto tag SIG instrumentation. And that's the way it could work.
I mean, maybe that's an intermediate level.
Yeah, it's possible. So we could do something like that.
Like I was hoping we could come up with one anyways, where like we're not immediately going from something that's alpha to something that's.
Oh, you mean like beta?
That I'm saying like this for something to be a beta metric, it must already comply to the metric stability guidelines.
Well, yeah, for the normal deprecation stuff, beta metrics have a different meaning. Like you can deprecate faster. So if you look at Kubernetes official deprecation policy, then basically it means like how long you are committed to supporting the thing. So we could have a similarly defined thing. It wouldn't be hard. I didn't really opt to do that because at the moment it was unnecessary, and we don't really have the concept of a beta. We have either things we support or we do not support.
On the other hand, I think maybe that's too late. Like the majority of huge problems that we've had with metrics in Kubernetes were like super buried implementation metrics, right? Like the reflector metrics, if people remember, like that would unlikely to be ever a stable metric anyways, right?
Yeah, that was a terrible metric, yeah.
And that twice produced a memory leak. So those would probably have been preventable if we had been had been asked for a review for those. So while I'm keen about a beta stage or something on metrics, I think Elena is right that we should be involved even in alpha metrics potentially.
Yeah, I think that beta metrics, I think that the MVP targeting alpha and stable, like that was the right scope. I think beta metrics would be potentially a cool thing to introduce down the road, but I don't think that that's something that we need to focus on, even like for say the 117 release. But I'm very excited about like now that we've got this framework in place, like what we can do with that, because it's like very weird when somebody's introducing a new metric and like SIG instrumentation is like maybe casually pulled into the conversation because somebody like notices there's a metric, but like our review is not required or whatever. And I don't think it necessarily has to be required for the alpha stuff, but just making sure that we're getting pinged and we have the visibility, because like right now it's very hard to track SIG instrumentation being a very horizontal SIG. It's like we can't keep track of the whole damn project on our own. So adding some automation to help out with that, especially because we're a small and short-staffed team, would be awesome. But just a thought.
I also think if we had automation like that, I mean, even you know about it. Like within Red Hat, we are having these conversations how SREs can get involved. Our SREs can get involved in these things. Like I think that's a really cool thing that we could point out at like SIG instrumentation intro sessions or at the developer summits. Like these are really cool ways to get involved at a like low, like even one-off reviews would be incredible, right? I think you're totally right. We should make sure that we make appropriate use of these tools that we now have. But I think it feels like everybody's kind of on the same page. And we have only 5 minutes left, and we have one more.
There's a couple also easier ways. So, I mean, like one is, yes, we can get reviews for all alpha stuff. Another thing is that there are a lot of metrics pieces currently that live in package. And these things are shared between different components. And as part of the migration, I moved some of them into component base, but it turned out that wasn't all of them. But I just rigged the framework stuff so that basically everything sideloads into, I just bypassed the entire shared metrics thing. If we wanted to migrate these things into component base, then basically it would give a home for these shared metrics, and there would be proper ownership over it. That's just another easy way to get some of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to make sure we get to our last topic as well.
Yeah, sure, sorry.
And thanks for all your work on this, Han. It's been
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think actually in general, like since you've joined, I think we've made huge progress in every dimension. So yeah, thank you for your work.
Yay.
Okay, so our last agenda item is improving umkill metrics, or maybe even lack thereof. So there is one metric in kube state metrics that I believe it's last termination reason, where umkill may be a label, but it's only a 0, 1 type of metric, and it only whatever the last actual termination reason was, right? So if that was a long time ago, then it still is the active series, but it doesn't actually matter anymore. So I think Elena put this on the agenda, but it came out of an like Red Hat internal meeting yesterday, that we have a need to be able to monitor this not just on a cluster level, but ultimately most people who are interested in these are actually people running applications on top of Kubernetes. So like roughly within the realm of cAdvisor, I would say. But it needs to probably be a higher, like, because when a container ooms, a new container is spawned for that. We need to find a different level of aggregation. And I guess that's kind of the thing that we need to agree upon.
Wait, can you already derive this?
From?
Well, you have metrics probes from the kubelet, and metric probes gives you whether or not the kubelet has attempted to restart.
But the probe only tells you whether there was a probe failure, right? That doesn't.
Yeah, there's a probe failure, but you can basically infer that when the failure counts for liveness, you can almost infer. You get like, liveness probe failures goes up by like 3, and then if you see your memory drop on a container, which is the one that failed, then
let me give you the example of the outage that we had that created this discussion. So we had a workload that was pretty much that was ooming all the time, and because of that, it kept being rescheduled to other nodes, which also caused other workloads on those nodes to also oom. Okay, so
it was set without limits. So
oh, interesting.
That was the problem. Yeah,
and
so it kept causing nodes to oom.
If we had understood that there was a particular workload that kept ooming at a very high rate, that would have allowed us to identify the root cause of this particular outage much faster. So yeah, that's kind of where we're coming from. Actually, we're already out of time. So maybe we can take this discussion either to our Slack channel or also into the next meeting. We're definitely interested in figuring out something. Yeah. And if anybody has suggestions, I'm more than happy to hear about them.
So why do you need the metrics? Why can't you just record the memory consumption? Because if you see something's memory consumption just increasing over time.
Well, so the issue is that like if the container gets killed, that time series will disappear, and there's not really a good way to like correlate. Like you've got a pod with a container, and that just keeps disappearing. Like we don't have a good way of saying like it's very hard. Like you can, if you're querying around in Prometheus, that's something that you could probably figure out like manually. But it's not something that scales. So like if you have this happening and you want to be able to detect that like that is happening with any given pod at any given time, in order to be able to alert on it, so you can go and take action and be like, hey, set a limit on this thing or something like that. then I would say the metrics that exist are not sufficient.
But you're going to have that problem with the umkill metric, right? Because it's going to be the same container is going to be restarted on multiple pods.
Yeah. And so, like, potentially, like, something, adding a counter or something like that, like, for that container, or like being able to track like occurrences of this in like events, or like there are a bunch of different possibilities. But from a cluster operator sort of point of view, right now, like the existing metrics, there's basically a lot of manual correlation that you need to do. It's not obvious based on the existing aggregated metrics what you can get out of that.
Yeah. So like the two possibilities that I see that we could do is either on an aggregation per kubelet, and this could be more useful to someone where like Kubernetes is often used by like multiple teams or something that is divided by namespaces or something where we could have an aggregate per namespace, although that's not particularly meaningful. It's a really interesting discussion to have, and I want to continue it. However, we are out of time, so I don't want to keep people in this meeting. So thanks everyone for joining, and see you next time, and have a wonderful local time. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye.